You might know Hadar Shemesh from her amazing YouTube channel, where she teaches millions of people all over the world how to improve their English pronunciation. You might not know, however, that she has recently moved to Barcelona in Spain. So, in this interview, I took the opportunity to ask her about her relocation. We talked about why she decided to move to Spain, what the relocation has been like, both for her and for her family. We talked about her experience learning Spanish and what this has taught her both as a human being and as a teacher of English. We talked about the role of AI in language learning. And of course, I took the opportunity to ask her for her best tips on English pronunciation. So, I hope you will enjoy this interview with the one and only Hadar Shemesh. Hello, Hadar.
Hi, Alistair. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastically. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm happy to speak to you.
Well, I am thrilled to speak to you as well. The theme for our conversation, as I said, is going to be relocation, as it is something that I have done, but it is also something that you have done in a big way. Uh,
Yes.
I have been watching your relocation diaries on YouTube, and
Hmm.
so I feel like I kind of know all about it, but I imagine that some people watching this will not. So, Hadar, can you tell me what you've done recently?
Yes. So 5 months ago, I decided to move with my family to Barcelona. Um, we have made the decision to move, and within 1 month, so it wasn't super planned. It's something that we've been thinking about and we've wanted to do for many, many years, but we never kind of like got practical in how to do it or where to go and what to, and then at some point we made a decision and we moved to Barcelona. I have two daughters. One is 11 and the other one is 8. So my partner and I moved, and here we are in Barcelona, and with everything that it means. And I don't speak Spanish, I don't speak Catalan, I only speak English and Hebrew. So obviously for those of you who have relocated, and for you as well, um, it's a big part of the experience, and we're probably going to talk about that.
Yes, I think we certainly will. Okay, and how long have you been in Barcelona now?
So we moved on January 4th,
Okay,
which makes it, yeah, almost a full 5 months, which is crazy. Like it feels like we just got here, but it also feels like we've been here for a lifetime.
okay,
So much has happened. Yes.
yeah, I can imagine. And so, can you talk me through your kind of thought process of the move? Because you said you've been thinking about it for a while, and then in the course of a month, you just decided to go for it. So,
Yeah.
what made you decide that you wanted to? What made you decide that you were thinking about moving, and then what was it that finally kind of pushed you over and thought, okay, right, now is the time we're gonna go for it.
So when I was 21, I moved to New York. I was on my own back then, right? I moved there. I wanted to study acting, which I ended up doing that, which led me to what I do today. And I, even though immigrating or relocating back then and then moving back home 5 years later has been really hard, like and challenging on so many ways, I feel like this has been one of the most important experiences that I've had as a human being, a developing human being. And when I had my daughters, I thought to myself, like, is this something that I could provide for them as well? We lived a very comfortable life. We had an incredible community. We had many friends. We still have those friends. They're just not around us anymore. My daughters have been to the same school since day one. So they never had serious challenges in adapting to a new community or new situations, where on one hand it's really good because they were very, very confident and comfortable, but at the same time I was like, I know that starting something new or putting yourself in a totally new situation or circumstances is hard, but it's really, really important for you and your personal development. So, like, that is one thing that I felt like I needed that for us. And also the language. Like, I wanted to learn a new language. I wanted my daughters, even though I speak English for most of the day with my students, with my team, my daughters did not want to speak English to me. And I'm like, I know how important it is. And I know that one of the gifts that I could give them is to immerse them in a different language. So I felt like living in a different country, even if it's for a little bit, would provide them with that environment and open their minds as to how to use the language. So that was another big thing. And in general, like I love being around um, different people to explore different cultures, and I felt that like I missed that. I got too comfortable in a way. And we've been thinking about doing that for many years, but again, it's a big decision, and I'm very, very close to my family. And I think that was the one thing that always kept me there. Like, I don't want to detach myself from my family. I don't want to detach my daughters from their grandparents and their cousins. So I never actually did it. But there were a lot of internal things in my country and in where I lived and the school, and like things started changing. And then we're like, and the girls were getting older. So about a year ago, we said, like, it feels like the next year, meaning September of like this upcoming September, like the next school year, like we really have to make a decision, because otherwise it would be too late. I don't want to, move somewhere else when my daughter is a teenager already.
Of course, yeah.
It feels like that sometimes. Um, so then we started talking about it more seriously. We started talking about that with our family. And then October happened, and like for those of you who know, like October 7th has changed life for everyone living in my part of the world, Israel and Gaza, for everyone, for both sides. And ultimately that has kind of like made me rethink my life and what I want for myself and for my girls. And there was no school for a long time. So it was an opportunity for us to travel and check it out. And by check it out, I mean check out Barcelona, which is one of the locations that we have considered. We have friends here, and we were always like thinking about coming back here. We haven't been here for years. So in November 2023, it was a good opportunity for us to come here. And this is when we said, like, it felt like everything started to make sense. Like, I wasn't 100% sure that that's what I wanted to do and if that was the right time back then. But things started, like, we started meeting all these incredible people here. We checked out one school and they said, hey, you have a place for like two last places in school, the two last seats. You can have them for your girls. And I'm like, wait a minute, like it's becoming too obvious that that's the next step. And I'm like the one of those people who listen to clues that the universe sends me. And it felt like it was, and people were super nice and everything worked out really nicely. And this is when we said, okay, we have to make a decision. And I think giving my daughters the opportunity to do it as early as possible, especially because of the language, that is what has pushed us to just make a decision and do it. And the reason why we did it so quickly is mainly because of me. Like, my partner, he wanted to do it, but he was like, we can wait until the next school year. But I'm the type of person that when I want something, I have to make it happen right now. Otherwise, I lose interest, or otherwise, like, I lose momentum. So I was like, you know what? Let's do it. And luckily, I have a digital business. So it wasn't a challenge apart from, kind of like packing up our lives there and finding and like starting our lives here. Not a lot has changed in how we live our life in terms of work. So
Mm.
that was a huge advantage.
Okay. Wow. But did your daughters take a little bit of convincing to go
Oh,
ahead with it?
yes. So that was hard because this is a point as a parent where you say to yourself, Do I get them on board? Do I need to get their consent? Or do I just tell them we have decided it because we think it's good for you? So obviously, we tried to explain what that is going to be like. We didn't try to sugarcoat it. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to have an amazing life. We said, we have an amazing life here with our family and with our friends, but we also want all these other things for you. And the young one, Asia, was excited about it. My older daughter, she's like, "You're ruining my career. I want to stay in school. I want to stay with my friends." Funnily enough, she is the one who got, immersed in the new school and in the new culture like really, really quickly, and it was much easier for her than my little one who was actually excited about it. But I think it's hard to expect kids to agree to something like that because it's like they lose control completely, and that's the hardest thing. It's like as a parent, it's like how do you still maintain that sense of control for your kids while doing something so big and like so you kind of like dismantle their power in a way.
Mm.
So that was the hardest part about the whole thing.
Yeah, I have a 4 year old and a 1 year old, um, and the 4 year old, yeah, he kind of took it fine actually. The main problem was that before we lived in Malta, which has a climate that is, I guess, not so dissimilar to Barcelona or Israel, as in it is just hot a lot of the time. And we moved to the
Uh,
west coast of Sweden, and we got here in early March, and it was freezing. And he kept on going, "I'm so cold. I want to go back to Malta." Um, and that is a kind of one where you have to say, actually, you are right. It is quite cold, but summer is coming.
And I think this is an important point, especially for all of the people listening and thinking about relocating, is like to really validate their experience, right? Like saying something like, "Oh no, it's not cold," or "It's gonna get," is not helpful, and it makes them feel like you're not listening to them, right?
Hmm.
It's like when my daughters are like, "I want to go home. I don't," I'm like, yeah, I know that you have friends here and you enjoy, but it's not going to help you that I'm going to say that. It's like, yeah, these feelings are valid. You miss home. It's hard. Um, and there are all these other things that are happening that are also potentially good.
Yeah, indeed. For me, it was we managed to find that he absolutely loved icicles, that he could wander around with big swords, pretending that
There
they
you
were
go.
they were icicles, and you certainly don't get that in Malta.
Exactly. Does it snow there, or was it snowing when you got there?
Yes, it was in Sweden. Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's ever snowed in Malta. Maybe some
No.
amateur
Yeah. No, I meant
meteorologist
to
can
Sweden. So
can
that was
can correct me on that one, but it does not normally snow.
no.
Cool. And so, other than the challenges of explaining to your family that you're moving to a different place, and of course your own close family, getting everyone on board with moving, what were some kind of practical challenges that you found when you got to Barcelona? Because,
Mm,
as you say, you didn't speak
many.
Spanish, and it's a new place. Um, how were the first few weeks when you arrived?
I think the hardest thing for me was dealing with suppliers because we got into a house. Luckily, we were able to sign a rental agreement where we found our apartment and signed our lease remotely. So we had a really good agent who found the apartment, took all these videos. So luckily, I didn't have to do that. And I already had an apartment, but it was empty. So furnishing it, getting all the appliances, the refrigerator,
Oh, wow, okay.
the washing machine, the dry, like that has caused so much stress and pain because I'm used to a certain way of handling things, deliveries, communication. So back home, like things were a lot more direct. Like there weren't a lot of questions about a certain delivery. Um, a refrigerator would fit in most elevators, not in our building. So, like, a lot of new things that I had to discover, and I was like, "Oh, you don't do that. Oh, you like, why did you return my refrigerator even though I paid for it? Um, oh, like, you can't just book, um, a a an external platform to bring it up. You have to book a space from municipality. Like, it's like so many small things that accumulate, and when you don't speak the language, that could be so frustrating. So you feel like you're burning time on trying to figure things out, or how things work, or like make sense, or speak to someone who understands you. And I think this was the main cause for pain, and it took a lot longer than I would have expected it to. And I like to make things happen quickly, and I had no control. So that is, I think, one thing that I've learned, like to let go of control, because you have no control yourself. Um, and to communicate well, because I think also it can create a lot of stress in relationships, like with my partner, with Gil. Like, we are a good team. We work together, but we had like some really serious fights over silly things, because everything is so extreme when you move, and then you face all these challenges that like it ends up exploding somehow. But I think that was my biggest challenge, and not being able to speak the language and get what I want.
And did you speak zero Spanish before you arrived, or you
Yeah,
had some?
sure. I understood. So if someone would speak to me on the phone, I would understand what they want, what they wanted. But it was hard for me to respond. And also the overwhelm and the emotional capacity of like me now concentrating. I feel like a little later, after I had moved, I haven't improved much in Spanish, but I was a lot more able to communicate. Right. So I think also like the mental state, when you're really, really stressed, it's harder for you to do even the most basic things that maybe you're capable of doing.
And I'm sure also it's a proper, pressure cooker situation if you have a fridge that is meant to be being delivered and can't go in the lift, and there's people calling you saying what's going on, and I'm sure you hear all the time from your students people saying, I can't speak under pressure, and the pressure
Yeah.
that most people are talking about is, I don't know, a work meeting or a phone call or something like that, and instead you've got people trying to bring up cookers and fridges, and
Yes.
yeah,
And
that's
they're like angry at me, and they're like speaking to me because they can't bring the refrigerator up. And I'm like, I don't know how to respond to this.
yeah.
Yes,
Oh, hard luck. Well, I hope your home is now furnished as you would like
it
it to
is.
be. Yeah.
It is. Thank you. It took
Okay.
5 months, but it is
Yeah.
now.
Very good. And were you prepared for that? I guess you're not prepared for the fact that these would be some of the biggest challenges. I mean, one of the questions I was thinking to ask you was, what were some challenges that you sort of knew would be a challenge, and what were challenges that surprised you?
So no, so I guess this surprised me. What I knew would be a challenge, but I didn't know how challenging it would be, was getting my visa, because I came here without a visa. I was ready to apply for a digital nomad visa, and bureaucracy in Spain is just insane. Like you have to get through so many things. Um, so I think that has also created a lot of stress and a lot of like unexpected complications. Oh, I need that form. No, I need it translated. I need it apostilled. Like, so when all the other things are happening and your girls are trying to adjust to school and you don't have a refrigerator, um, I did not expect all of that. And I'm really good with managing big projects. And I feel like my skill at managing big projects has served me, but that was like beyond. But apart from that, like I want to say that Barcelona has been very, very welcoming. Like I found good people here. Um, Ultimately, like I didn't feel like something was going against me. It was just like challenging, but I wasn't feeling like, oh, this was a mistake.
Mm. Yeah, I can certainly I can certainly empathize with dealing with all that kind of bureaucracy.
Mm.
I didn't even know what an apostille was until relatively recently, but now I
Me too.
certainly know what it is.
and how long you need to wait for it.
Yeah, and I was also in recently. The reason I'm able to be in Sweden as a British person is because I recently got Italian citizenship, and I
Ooh,
was in this sort of mad loop where um, the Italian embassy in Malta wouldn't believe something that the British embassy was saying, and the British embassy was trying to say something to the Italian embassy, and embassies are not famous for being fast and efficient, and
no.
yeah, it was awful.
Mm,
Um,
yeah. Immigration departments también, like
yeah,
same thing, right? Like
yeah,
so it's really if I know. And
okay,
it's good to get help. Like that's what I've learned. Get help, get lawyers, get someone to do this for you because otherwise it's just like too much.
cool. So you're on a digital nomad style visa.
Yeah, me and my family.
Ah, excellent. I think I'd read that Spain had some kind of digital nomad type thing, but I didn't.
Yeah, but like
I'd
on
never
the
met anyone who was
surface,
doing it.
really easy to get. Like when I first read it, I was like, piece of cake. I'm like the essence of being like of a digital business. But it was a lot harder because there are a lot of nuances and like you needed to qualify for a certain. It's like really old school, even though it's a pretty like a progressive idea. But it was still like only for freelancers working for companies, and I had my own company, so I didn't fit in the category. So it was you know,
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you are fridged up and you've got all of your appropriate
safe.
papers or digital papers. Very good. And can you talk me through a kind of day in the life now in Barcelona? Uh, is this yeah? What does a typical day in the life look like for Hadar in Barcelona?
In Barcelona. Um, so I wake up at 6:20, which is a lot earlier than what I used to wake up at in back home. But I wake up at 6:20, I get my girls ready. We have a full hour to get ready. Sometimes it's full of drama and chaos like today, and sometimes it's smooth and joyful and I feel like I've cracked the code on being a parent. Just to be humbled the following day. We get the girls ready. We get them up on the bus to go to school at 7:30, and that's where my day starts until 5:15 when we pick them up. It's a very very long day. Back home, they would go to school for 6 hours and that's it. Now it's like almost 10 hours, including the ride back and to and back from school. But I feel like my day has filled up with a lot of space for work and creativity. So I would usually start my day like I don't take meetings in the first 4 hours of the day. So I kind of like take notes and I write my plan for the day. I do creative work. So if I need to develop something or I need to kind of like think about something, that is what I do in the morning. And then usually around 1 or 2, I start having meetings with my team because my team is all around the world. And that's usually the case. I do a little bit more work. I take a break until the end of the day. I try to get like the Spanish lifestyle and add a siesta to my day. I haven't been able to just yet,
Yeah.
but I haven't lost hope.
I'm sorry. It's this will be published at a different time, but it's 2 p.m. now, so I feel like I'm maybe am I keeping you away from your siesta? If so, I'm
I
very sorry.
know. I know, right? Like, okay, we have to finish. I have to go and rest. No, but I'm still like, I've never had that, but I feel like this is definitely something that I want to learn. Also, like, take time when I have lunch and not eat by my computer or quickly and go back to work. So I'm still trying to manage it. Like, the whole relocation experience and prior to that, like there was when the war started, I my life stopped, so I haven't done a lot of significant work for a few months. I kept teaching and everything, but like I feel like once I got back to working here, um, I had to catch up on a lot of stuff that I wasn't present for because of the relocation. So I'm really busy. So I kind of like fill up my days with content until my daughters get back. Sometimes I go work outside, and that's like what I love most because I walk a lot in Barcelona. Oh, I forget to say that I do my morning walks every day, which is also something that has been so significant because for me to walk in a big city in those big avenues, like that has been a dream of mine, and I'm actually doing it every single day. And then when the girls are back at the end of the day, we just spend time together. I help them with their homework. And then we usually end the day. They go to sleep really late because of the light. Like it's bright until probably for you as well. Well, depends when, but in the summer, it's
Very,
like
yeah,
it gets
very late.
dark at 9 or 10, and so they stay up until that time. So like by the end they're asleep, but by the time they're asleep, I'm like done. I go to bed and I read or and then I go to sleep.
Okay, well, it sounds like a very full and fulfilling day.
Yes, like I wish I could give more space to the city, and enjoy it because there's so much to enjoy, like eat out but slowly, slowly.
Yeah, I I'm in a very similar boat. We moved 2 months ago, and
Hmm.
a few people have asked me, do you have any recommendations for like places to go, like restaurants or bars? And I haven't done any of that because we don't know anyone here. We don't have
Mm,
help or babysitters or anything. My kids are younger than yours, um, and that they sort of require us to be completely there all the time. So
right.
I feel like I haven't really explored this at all, and I've moved to lots of other. I've moved several times in my adult life, but this is the first time doing so with kids, and I probably hadn't appreciated quite how different the experience is, because you're in their routine rather than your adult routine of
Right.
going out and
Yeah.
perhaps meeting people or being able to do other things. So my wife and I have tried to have a decent enough balance where I do evening Swedish classes and she does a similar thing on
Mm.
another evening. But yeah, it's tough.
It's tough, and I think it's important to create space for that because then there's like a whole nother layer of appreciation for where you have moved to, which is like if I'm in the house all day working, then what's the point if I'm not experiencing the city or the language? And um, the other day, Gil and I met for lunch, which is something that we never do. I was in school. So last week I studied Spanish for a week um, in school. Now I'm continuing on my own. But he came and met me after school. And for the first time since we got here, we had lunch. We went to one of the markets and we had lunch. We sat on the bar. We had a glass of wine. And it was strange because, like, when you go abroad with your family, you never have time alone as parents, right? You're always with the family, and all of a sudden we're like, "Hey, we're abroad and we're hanging out alone. We need to do more of that because that was like so refreshing." So I want to do more of that.
Yeah. Okay. Lucky you. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
my
aim for that, Alistair.
yeah.
Yeah.
I certainly will. My wife works at the university, and I was invited to the university canteen for one lunch, which is
Ooh.
calling it a canteen does it a real disservice because it was completely delicious. Um, and it
Mhm.
was the staff canteen, so I think they get slightly fancier
Ooh.
stuff.
So this is why you moved there.
Yes, that was why we moved there.
Yeah.
So yeah, we moved there because she was offered this job, and
Amazing.
it's it was a yeah. We never really thought about moving to Sweden as a place, but her field is quite specialized, and these kind of jobs don't come up very often. So we thought, why not? Let's just go for it. And that was, yeah, in fact, we had almost the opposite to you in terms of we like she accepted the job I think almost 9 months before we actually started because for various reasons. Number one, we didn't want to go right in the middle of Swedish winter. We thought that's probably not a good way to start off
No.
the the thing. Number two, she was just coming back from maternity leave, and
Mm.
the Swedish system basically allows for parents to, I think, have up to 18 months of
Yeah.
maternity or paternity leave. It's excellent compared to most
Yeah.
countries, but especially compared to Malta, where she had, I think, 4 months maternity
Mhm.
leave. So we realized that if she'd actually started work, then then we wouldn't have been able to send our youngest son to nursery. So
Mm,
I would have looked after him all the time, which would have been lovely, but would have really been tricky trying to run a full time business. So
all right.
we
Like
delayed.
so many things you have to take into consideration when you make such a move. That's
Yeah,
insane. Yeah.
indeed. Anyway, so now we moved, and it was the start of Swedish spring, and the sun is shining, and life is good. Nice. Let's move on a bit and talk a bit more about Spanish, can we? And
Mm,
your language learning experience, because I imagine it must have been humbling in some respects to have gone from language teacher, teacher to millions, teacher, coach, trainers, uh, whatever word you would call yourself, to being back in the shoes of a beginner,
yeah.
someone who's starting from scratch. So, can you talk me through your experience so far, what you've learned, and yeah, what you've taken
Yes.
from it?
So humbling is really the word that I use to describe my experience here. Like both the move and especially my language learning experience, because I have all these ideas and opinions about how you should practice and how you should do, and like I think, like, I follow it and I think it's fantastic, but not being able to express myself, communicate, do the basic things, and recognizing how my brain works, um, and the challenges I'm facing has been really like eye opening, but also a huge source of creativity, motivation, inspiration, admiration for my students and the work that they do. Like so much appreciation. Like I do not take for granted um, this work and being fairly fluent in a language, but it really reminded me that this is tedious, hard, consistent work that gives a lot of joy. Like I really enjoy studying Spanish. It's not something that I don't enjoy, but creating time and space for it is what is the hardest for me. And so I do feel like I get a lot of new ideas. It opens up my mind around how I teach English, what is needed, what is missing. I have a lot of opinions. So last week, like I said, I went to a language school for the first time. I really didn't have time to do it before. So I decided I'm going to do like an immersive program, like it was intensive, 20 hours a week. And it was it was good, but I'm also like, I know what's missing. I know what's missing for me. I see what's missing for other students. And it's a good school. Like I have no complaints, and it's really hard to change that. But being a teacher in teaching this work, I think it's important to stay connected to language learning, especially the beginning phase. And I'm very grateful for that. Like I wanted that, and I'm very grateful for that. Um, the hardest thing for me is to find time to do it, because it's really, and it's an excuse because I have time. Like, and I practice at least 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day. I want more. So I think that is my biggest challenge right now. And finding the balance between grammar that I don't love, and the actual act of speaking in practice, which I love. So like I'm trying to do a little bit of everything. And I discover online tools, like I use ChatGPT a lot to create my exercises and to understand how to translate things. And yeah, I'm really learning. I feel like I'm gonna pack it all up to um probably I'm gonna make a video about how I learned Spanish, but this is really a place of exploration for me.
Okay. So you sort of you're doing a little bit of Spanish before, then you did this intensive course, and now you're sort of that gave you a better idea of what you need to be doing in terms of the right mix of grammar and speaking and other things, and how to create the most effective, uh, Hadar's perfect course type thing.
Yeah, like exactly. For me, like what would be the best path? Cuz on one hand I feel like grammar is something that is so critical for the beginning so that you can structure a sentence, but I can see how overwhelming it is. And I've always said that, like, get the basic grammar and then get fluent and confident and then learn the more advanced stuff. Otherwise, it's so overwhelming because there's always something else to say about it. There's always this irregular form. There, like, and I'm going through my book and I read the rules, and then there's like, but there is this and there is that. And I feel like the anxiety coming up is like, how am I going to remember this? And then I need to remind myself that I'm not supposed to remember it. I need to be in the language and live the language. And that is how I'm going to learn. So like I think that is the balance that I'm trying to find out. Right now I'm celebrating the small wins, like being able to understand a lot better, learning more verbs. For example, I feel like that is what's holding me back, like verbs. I need verbs to be able to communicate because nouns and adjectives, like sometimes not, you don't have to use a complete sentence to get what you want, but you have to have a verb,
Hmm.
so I'm like, okay, so let me understand what is the core vocabulary that I need, the common phrases that I need to use, and then like, and that is what I'm focusing on right now, and I feel like it's been really helpful for me.
I think it sounds like a smart move. Focus on verbs, not get too bogged down with grammar exceptions and rules and stuff like that. I saw that actually in a Swedish class I was in. The teacher was explaining, what's a subject, an object, and a verb, and I saw that in like I'm looking around. It was a small class. I think there were 10 of us, and quite a lot of people almost sort of froze because they weren't familiar with what a subject was and an object was. A verb, I think they did
Right.
know, but it's sort of clearly you understand the sentence, but what is a subject and what's an object? It doesn't make obvious sense if you're not familiar with those grammar terms. And I sort of saw the look on people's face that it kind of puts up a wall almost immediately, thinking this is
Yeah.
going to be hard because I have to learn. Not only
Yes.
do I have to learn something else, I have to learn these new words and rules for a language, and I never had to do this in my mother tongue. I mean, maybe things have slightly changed, but in British schools, we never really, at least I never remember having to, learn subject, object, verb, and all these grammatical
It's
terms.
intuitive. You
Uh,
use it all the
yeah,
time. You don't need to like analyze it. Right.
and so yeah, so when they're confronted with these for the first time, often as adults, your your kind of guard goes up, and it just seems scary. But at the same time, it's not the easiest subject for a teacher to explain without
Yeah.
using those kinds of terms. So it's yeah, I'm very interested to see how the teacher in my class, he seems excellent. She says she's been
Mm.
teaching since 1989, um, and it still
A
seems to be
lot.
incredibly enthusiastic. So I've got all the faith that she will do a wonderful job. But it's very funny and interesting to sort of watch people learn and watch yourself learn as well.
Yes. Yeah. I'm learning a lot about it. I'm learning about a lot about my, like, I've learned a lot about my classmates, like how they are learning and how it is different for me because I deal with language. I have a friend visiting me here now from the US, and I've always noticed that her grammar was like perfect. She always uses the all the tenses by the book, cuz in American English you don't always use the past perfect tense and you don't always use certain forms, and she always has, like, language is her superpower. And we were talking, and she's learning Spanish here now, and we are talking about tenses. And then we were talking about the perfect tense, and she was like, I said something about the past perfect tense, and she had no idea what I'm talking about. And like I gave her examples and I talked about the aspect, like the perfect aspect when it comes to tenses. And for her, it was brand new, which was surprising to me because to me, like her grammar is so good. Like I always notice how she uses everything so um, accurately. So it was hard for her to do that, to make that switch from American, like English grammar to Spanish grammar, even though she has it. And that's when it's like, it's harder for people who are not immersed in linguistics and language learning, and it's harder. It's less
Yeah.
intuitive.
I guess it's also why people say that if you've learned one language, it becomes easier to learn, a third and a fourth and so on, because you've got all those rules and terms internalized to a certain degree, and also, like you say, that you've got a better idea of how to learn more effectively, and what's useful and what's not as useful for you. Um,
Yeah.
have you found it difficult to sort of resist the urge to, I don't know, to kind of put it to get into like teacher Hadar mode in Spanish class, because presumably there are some times when I don't know, you can see that someone is struggling to understand something, and you know that you can explain it to them. Is Has that happened?
Yeah, I was in a constant battle with myself, like because you had to practice one on one, and my partner struggled, and there were so many times where I heard her misuse the verb or not conjugate it, and I'm like, Hadar, it's not your job to give her feedback. And then something like, for the most part, I'd be quiet, and then I'd start explaining why something is, and it was really refreshing for her. Like she wanted me to explain it, and she's and at one time, the teacher tried to explain something to one of the students, and the student just didn't get it, which is another thing for teachers, like to understand what the real issue is when a student asks a question. Because if you just repeat the answer and the student doesn't get it, you probably didn't really get where the confusion is. And I got what her confusion was right away because, it's something that I was thinking about. And it's like something that when you don't have, um, all these pronouns in your first language, you will experience like that's the clash. I always talk about it. Like when you learn, the struggle in a language is the clash between your native grammar and the grammar of the learned language, right? And you have to identify the clash. And if the teacher cannot identify the clash, then the answer is not going to be complete. It's just going to be like, this is how it is. And I see it with pronunciation. Like if a student can't pronounce an R and they keep saying R, and the teacher might say, pull the tongue back, round your lips, and keep explaining how to do it without addressing why they're not doing it. Hey, your tendency is to bring the tongue um, to touch the upper palate. That's the same category. You just need to switch it, right? Like, so then when you explain it by understanding the mistake, understanding the clash, it makes so much more sense. So I kind of like jumped in and I explained it to her
Hmm.
in English. Um, and I think like I maybe overstepped my boundaries because the teacher was kind of like looking. She was super, super nice, but I think that was like an awkward moment, but she understood and I couldn't help myself. But yeah, I'm trying it's hard as a teacher. Like that's what you want. You want to help.
Yeah.
Um,
I guess I would imagine if I was in the position of your teacher, part of me would be thinking, I'm sure, I'm grateful that someone is sort of being my like teacher's assistant here, but at the same time, you know, that's enough unsolicited intrusion into my lesson.
yes. Exactly.
Um, what One thing that I think I maybe I read about it on your blog or saw it in one of your videos, which I thought was a really interesting idea, was something you called the illusion of learning.
Yeah.
Can you talk me through what that is and why you think it's important?
Yeah, it's so important. It's so important. It's so prevalent in traditional language learning, but also contemporary, like now, like, learning online, learning on your own. The illusion of learning is really the experience of putting in a lot of time and effort into learning without seeing results. Like I always compare it to being on the hamster wheel. You're like the hamster runs, runs, runs on the wheel, but never gets anywhere, just stays in the same place. So you put in a lot of time and energy, but you're not seeing the impact of your work. And usually that is the result of ineffective learning and consumption over production. Because we've been taught in school to sit down and listen to the teacher and just, you know, receive the content, make sense of it in your head, maybe practice it for a little bit, and then you're supposed to use it. And then you're supposed to learn it. And then you're supposed to know it. Um, and the brain just doesn't work this way because repetition is key. And not only repetition, but innovative production of language is really what's going to help you learn something and put it into practice. And there's very little room. It's a technical issue when a teacher has a lot of content to teach and they can't repeat the same topic again and again. Students are going to get bored and they can't have them speak because it's a class of 20, 30, 50, 40 people. So that's, traditional learning. And also, when we think about people learning with YouTube or podcasts, you're constantly consuming the content and you're learning new rules and you're learning more things. You develop your knowledge, but you're not putting it into practice, or you're not really improving when speaking, maybe slightly. And the gap becomes bigger. So the more you learn, the more you know, but the less you're able to use it. And then that creates even more frustration of like, now you notice your mistakes and there's nothing you can do about it. Right. So the solution to that is, first of all, to understand that when you learn something, for you to be able to remember it and use it consistently, you have to use it. You have to put it, you have to produce, let's say you learn a structure. It's not enough you have to say it out loud. That's how you remember. You have to repeat it. Even if it's forms that you are just reading from, a piece of paper, but you have to say it out loud again and again and again until things click. The sounds, the structure, the context, right? That's how you understand how to use. That's how babies learn a new grammar form, right? Like, you don't teach them the perfect tense. They just hear a certain form in a certain context again and again and again and again and again until they get it. And that is how I think we should do it as well, but we don't. So to put it into practice and to produce the language a lot more. I get it that it's never going to be 50-50 because it's a lot easier and more fun to consume content than to produce content. But that is what's keeping us stuck, and not really, like, the work that you put in is not equal to the output that you get or the results that you get. So that and effective learning, and also the illusion of learning, is also learning all these fancy things that you don't need, right? Like all the advanced vocabulary where, it's hard for you to have a casual conversation next to the coffee machine at work. Like, why do you need to learn all that fancy advanced vocabulary? Because you've been sold this idea by like several viral videos that is what you need to learn to be an advanced speaker. But no one uses this language. Why spend time learning these words when you're less likely to use them, right? So I'm like all about efficient, practical learning until you get to a certain stage where it's just, you have the luxury of expanding,
Mm.
learning more things.
Yeah, I'm certainly not at that stage with with my Swedish.
Same here.
Um, and for people who might be watching this thinking like, maybe that's me in English, that what I'm doing is an illusion of learning, as you put it. How can they figure out if that is them, and what simple changes do you think they can make?
Great. So I think, first of all, you would know, like, if what I just said resonated with you listening, then probably that's where you're at. And most people are at that stage. Like, if you're learning on your own, or if you're going to, if you're not studying one on one, or you're studying one on one with a teacher who just teaches you content and you don't practice, right? So you might be facing that where, like, you do spend time learning, maybe even every day, but you feel like you're not progressing. You're in a plateau, right? If that is the case, you're probably stuck in the illusion of learning. How to improve? Identify what is most critical now, right? Like, where do you need to improve? If it's grammar, don't go and learn all the tenses of English. Try to identify Where do you get stuck mostly? Is it when you use if? Is it when you talk about the future? Is it when you talk about the past? Identify the 20%, the 20% that will get you 80% of the results, the Pareto principle. So work from your experience and then say, oh, yeah, it's conditionals. Go study that, right? Just that, not all the perfect tenses. And when you do, then the using it out loud is critical. So whether it's repeating structures out loud and creating structures on your own, that is the best way to do it. Now, really, like now we have tools like AI, ChatGPT, where you can create sentences and actually get feedback. So you can say it out loud. Always say it out loud. Don't stay in the reading and writing. That's easier, right? The hard part is to produce it and to speak. So learn specific things that could help you, practice it out loud, repeat it several times, and then create it on your own. If it's a new word that you're trying to learn, identify the words that you're missing when speaking, right? Don't just learn lists of words. If it sounds, identify the sounds that prevent you from being clear or that always get in your way, or you feel self-conscious or you avoid, like the R. You know, if you're the type of person who avoids words with R, then learn the R, practice the R, say it out loud, and use it intentionally, right? So it's less work, but it has more impact on your actual speaking.
I think that's wonderful advice. And I get so many emails. And I'm sure you get way 10 times the amount of emails that I get from people saying exactly that kind of thing, in terms of I can understand a lot more than I can speak, and I just have I have problems speaking. And uh, you know eh, suggesting to those people that they really try to pinpoint exactly where their problems are. Is it with if? Is it with producing certain sounds? Because speaking English or fluency in English can seem like such a huge goal that really
Right.
is just it's 1,000 different goals broken down into small pieces. And
A
if you're
hundred
trying to focus
percent.
on everything, then it's going to seem so impossible. But if you're just focusing on one thing at a time, then that's how you get there.
Exactly. And for you to discover what those things are is really to speak as much as possible. And that is another thing that I want to address is that people learn a lot, but they don't speak. And I know it sounds like the silliest, most obvious advice, but people wait to get better before they go out there and speak to other people. And that is the biggest mistake, because that's when they get stuck. Is speak with other people will allow you to make mistakes and identify your challenges, identify where the clashes are in pronunciation, grammar, vocabulary. It's going to build your confidence. It's going to make it not just about English, but also about connection, which is why we learn a language in the first place, right? So to put yourself out there and speak more, overcome the limiting beliefs that prevent you from going out there and speaking. And while you speak, improve your fluency, flow, and identify your challenges, and then learn those things. This is like the natural, healthiest way of learning and improving, in my opinion.
Yeah, get out there and start speaking, recognizing your mistakes and embracing your
Yes.
mistakes. Um, can I ask you, because you mentioned it, about ChatGPT and AI driven language apps? Because there are so many AI tutors, and
Mm.
chat with an AI English tutor, and create your own AI avatar and all that kind of stuff. Um, can I ask you about your honest thoughts on those kinds of apps?
Mm. Yeah, of course it makes me cringe a bit because I'm like, I develop community learning. Like my courses are based on a community, human interaction, human magic, right? Like that is the thing that gets people inspired, excited, motivated, not a machine. However, like I do understand that this is where the world is going to. And I want to acknowledge that this is yet another way to practice when you're on your own. So if the other alternative was just you in front of in front of a piece of paper, then yes, maybe these apps could be useful. But also they get you very, very comfortable and you don't feel all the feelings that you might have when speaking to someone else. And you don't feel stressed or guilty or insecure when you make a mistake in front of a robot, right? And managing these emotions when speaking to other people while speaking is a skill that you need to develop. And the only way to do it is by speaking to real people, because that's when our emotions get in the way. And this is where we need to listen and to practice listening and understanding, right? And I think that is far more important than getting corrected on your grammar, right? Like being able to hold a conversation, to listen, to ask the right questions, to stay present, to not let your fears get in the way, not, when you go to a job interview and you feel evaluated and you feel like someone's judging you, how do you still manage to maintain an idea, right? AI is not going to help you with that. Maybe you would use, the S when um, conjugating verbs, but it's not what's going to help you be a human in front of someone else in a second language.
Do you know, I don't think I have heard anyone mentioning that factor before, that it's about helping you understand how to communicate with other people rather than um, improving your grammar or your vocabulary or teaching new words or something like that. It's a really interesting perspective, and I completely agree, because if you're there chatting with an AI tutor and you don't understand, or you get distracted, you can just put your phone down. Who cares?
Right.
But clearly, if you're in a shop in Barcelona and someone says something to you, you're probably not going to just walk away because you don't understand what they say. You have to figure out that situation as a human being. Um,
Right.
and yeah, perhaps AI is not going to help at all with that. It might help you develop some of the language capabilities so that you don't get into that situation in the first place, but you're not
Right.
developing that important emotional muscle that you would
Yeah.
be if you were.
That is intrinsically connected to speaking a language when you're among other people. Now, again, like I think AI saves you a lot of time, right? If you want, but it's also not 100% trustworthy. So you cannot leave out the human factor and common sense when using AI. So like it's tricky.
There's also one. I don't know if you've noticed this trend on YouTube, but um, of completely AI generated sort of English podcasts or English conversation, and some of them have hundreds of thousands of views, and it's and I noticed that there are some mistakes. Sometimes there are grammar mistakes. There is almost always slight pronunciation mistakes. Things that just clearly sound unnatural in terms
Yeah.
of word stress, connected speech, and so on. And I can
Mm,
I can understand the kind of comforting reason that people perhaps like watching these, because it's kind of familiar, it's slow, it is robotic, so it perhaps sounds easy to understand, but at the same time, that is really not how anyone, a native or non-native speaker, speaks. So
right.
you're really learning in the wrong way, in my opinion. Plus, YouTube is free. It's not a question of cost or anything. There are so many,
Good. Yeah.
uh, so many, um, so many wonderful teachers and uh, speakers of English that you can learn from. I'm just completely astounded by how many of these things there are.
I agree. And like it is really scary. And this is, I always say that I think like every learner, especially like new age learners where you have all that knowledge at the tip of your fingers, you have to be a responsible learner and you have to be in ownership of your own journey, right? Like, on YouTube, you will find good teachers and bad teachers. You will find people teaching incorrect things, and you would find teachers who teach really well, but they don't keep your attention. So you have to find what makes sense for you, and also understand that, like, if you do follow AI, like, be critical, be judgmental. Don't, like, if you choose to do that, and if like, and understand the disadvantage of it, um and be mindful, and a little bit of everything is not a bad thing, like, especially of even a controversial thing like this. But be remember that you're always in ownership of your own journey, and be responsible.
Mm. That is certainly good advice. Now, I feel like people would not forgive me if I didn't ask you anything about pronunciation, because I, I feel it's probably fair to say that you are best known for being the YouTube queen of pronunciation,
Hmm.
the pronunciation guru. I'm sure there's many other
Well,
things that people have called you. Can you give me your best advice for someone who is worried about their pronunciation?
yeah. So yes, I'm very passionate about teaching pronunciation, as you know. And if you don't know, you'll see on my channel and my podcast. Um, I feel like it gives you back your power, and I see that with when learning Spanish now, like how important it is, how fundamental it is for learning a language, not just to. And it's not about sounding native. It's not even about sounding clear, which is important. Like, it's really how the language is. It's the essence of the language, because this is how you. It's not less important than grammar or vocabulary, to a degree, right? Like, you don't need to know all the sounds of English, but you need to understand what is challenging for you, so that you can hear it better and you can use it better to get what you want ultimately. And I do think that people are hyper aware of what's happening in their mouth. So when they become self conscious about it, it affects their overall confidence and then fluency. So it's really also connected to, their confidence, and also being able to remember and retain new words. Because if you just remember the spelling, especially in English, that's really hard. Um, my best advice is to, first of all, understand that there are levels to using pronunciation. The first one is perception. Like, if you can't hear something that you're trying to learn, if you can't hear the difference, for example, the difference between sheep and ship, or they and day, or even bay and pay, right? That's not a critical difference, but like a regular P and an aspirated P. If you can't hear it, you can't make it. So a lot of this work is really opening your ears and understand and listening to it, because your brain filters out a lot of information, and sometimes it's important information, and it filters it out because it doesn't exist in your own language. But it does exist in the language that you're learning, and this is why you can't trust everything that you hear, because you're not really hearing it, you're perceiving it, right? You hear a lot more than what you process. So, first, you need to understand, um, to hear the differences. Then you need to know, like, is it really a challenge for me? If you replace the L with an R, it's going to be a challenge if you say right instead of light.
Mm.
If you just say right instead of right, less of a challenge. People will understand that replacement, right? So, there are some things that are more critical and some things that are less critical. So, my opinion is that you need to focus on the critical, the things that prevent you from understanding others, and the things that preventing you from being understood. So, focus here as well. The 20% is also really critical in pronunciation work. Then you need to understand the struggle. What is your tendency versus what you should be doing? So, again, going back to the light right, let's say for a Japanese speaker, then understanding that R's and L's are pronounced the same with a tap, and both of them don't exist in English, right? Neither of them is identified as an R or as an L. Then you start understanding where the challenge is. It doesn't solve the problem, but it helps you be more willing to start solving it, right?
Can I just
Yes.
ask one question? So how would someone go about realizing whether something is critical or non-critical?
That's a great question. So I can tell you what, in my opinion, what are the top, like the most critical mistakes. The first one is omitting or adding sounds. So dropping consonants or vowels, or adding consonants and vowels. So, for example, if you tend to say tech instead of texts, people are not going to understand you. It's going to be really, really hard. And for you, you might even not notice that you're doing it. And it's because you don't have clusters in your language. So your brain is like, oh, it's not important. Let me drop it. But in English, it's critical. Like it would change the meaning of the word. So that is a critical challenge. If you replace one consonant with another consonant or vowel, one sound, with another vowel sound that exists in English, like R and L, T and D, or sorry, th, th, and s, you might say sink instead of think. That is something that is going to prevent you from being understood. So replacing one sound that exists in English with another sound that exists in English. And then later on, we have, like, the dominant consonants like the R and the L, where people mispronounce them, and the TH, right? But then it's not always critical, but it's nice to work on so that you can develop more fluency and confidence and clarity. And after that, vowel replacements like sheep, ship, pool, pull, bed, bad. It's not critical because people can understand you because of context, but that would be kind of like a little bit below. Now, how do you know if you do these things? Well, first of all, become aware that these mispronunciations or these replacements happen, and then start asking yourself, is this something that I'm experiencing? Um, I would also say that a critical pronunciation challenge is a sound that gives you a hard time. For example, I have a lot of students who have immigrated to the US and they really struggle with the flap T. You're not going to find it relatable, but the flap T is a T between two vowels and it sounds like a light D, like Betty or get it.
Betty.
And
Okay.
people get like really obsessed with it. They feel self-conscious about it. They can't say words like party. Now, if they were to say party and Betty, they would be fully understood. And that's how it's pronounced in other dialects. But they get really self-conscious about it. So I would say, okay, this is something you should work on because it bothers you. And then you don't want to feel self-conscious. And it's something that you can quickly work on. And that is something that I would prioritize, let's say. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it certainly does. I can tell you something that for me is critical in Swedish is the number seven in Swedish. I will mispronounce now for you. It is it's pronounced something like "ru." I was told that you have to basically
Oh,
it's as if you're saying "phew" in English, but you kind of spit out a little bit more.
I'm so curious now to
Maybe
understand what
maybe
those sounds are.
afterwards. I'm sure there'll be. It's probably the most popular like subject for Swedish Swedish YouTubers. Like this is how you say "whew." Anyway, I can't say that properly. I
Like,
maybe
you don't wanna
I'll
mispronounce it. Now, I have a question. If you mispronounce it, would it sound like a different word?
um probably, but I don't know what that would be.
Not yet.
Problem is that every phone number in Sweden starts 07, so you've really got to nail the number. But I imagine
I
there are
know.
enough. It's people know that phone numbers are going to start with seven, so if they have idiots like me saying, then they will be okay. Okay, I know I've taken up a vast amount of your time, Hadar. So thank you for being so generous, talking about your experience with relocation and also giving us some insight into your own Spanish learning experience and pronunciation tips. I would really recommend for people to follow Hadar's relocation diaries because that is
Mm,
a real life, a real life and real life insight into how things are going. I think that's on your YouTube channel and your podcast.
yeah. Mhm. Yes.
So
Thank you
everyone
so much. And
go and
it's
check that out.
it's a good opportunity to say that we're gonna have an interview with you about your relocation experience. I'm sure, a lot of
Ah,
your listeners have, they already know a thing or two about it, but, we're gonna discuss this on my channel as well. So we'll put the link as well when it's ready
And
for people.
hopefully by that time, I will have mastered the pronunciation of rue.
I'm gonna check it. We're gonna practice it together.
Amazing. Hadar, is there anything else that you would like to say to people watching this video?
No, I think we talked about a lot of things. I think I love the way you approach language learning and kind of like making it not just about the language, but really about immersing yourself in the content, making it interesting. So thank you so much for all that you do for our students around the world and this industry, like with that positive um, attitude. I think like this is definitely what people need to develop and grow. So thank you so much. Thank you for this opportunity. And for those of you listening, remember that this is, you know, you're supposed to have fun learning and enjoy. And if it doesn't feel good and empowering, then change things up, try different things, and understand that the purpose here is to help you tap into your full potential and make strong connections. And I think that's what language learning is about. It's not about perfection. It's not about knowing all the words. It's really about, fulfilling yourself and connecting with the world. So let's not forget that.
Well, that is an inspiring message to end on. So thank you so much again for your time, Hadar, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Alistair. Thank you for having me.
Thanks. Bye.